Hello and welcome to Mcasts. This is Dr. Mark Miravalle, Professor of Theology and Mariology at the Franciscan University of Steubenville. I want to talk to you, my friends, about a phenomenon that I'm seeing occurring more frequently in more families, in more social situations, in a rather ubiquitous way right now, and that is greater feelings of anxiety, of frustration, of feeling overwhelmed with a personal situation, overwhelmed by perhaps long-term crosses. But there seems to be a new edge to it, my friends. And the new edge is, this is simply too much. New levels of despair and depression and anxiety and new levels of even dysfunction. Now, that's not a pretty picture, but it's the picture of what's taking place for many people today. And rather than avoid it, let's just take it head on. When we find ourselves in a situation like that, of extraordinary anxiety or new levels of despair or depression, or feeling that there's no coping possibilities, we return to our Catholic roots. We return to the foundations of what it means to be a member of the one holy Catholic and Apostolic Church. And essentially, my friends, that's summarized by the great St. John Bosco in what's called the Catholic Triangle. And that is the Eucharist, number one, our Blessed Mother, number two, and our Holy Father, number three. Now I know you've heard these things before. Of course you've heard them. You are Catholic, or you've been Catholic, but I'm asking you to view them with a new depth, and that is, these are remedies to a peaceless heart. These are new ways by which you can handle anything in the outside world, from neighbor to world crisis, if you seek the peace of Christ through these three means. So, and I want to give you, as we enter this in the next couple of our programs, I want to start with a vision by the same saint. This was called the Great Dream of St. John Bosco. Now, St. John Bosco is well known for his many prophetic dreams, but this stands apart, and this is known by many Catholic faithful from the middle of the 19th century to our present day. Well, the scene is this. In the dream of St. Don Bosco, or Don means father in Italian, Don Bosco or St. John Bosco, St. John was given a vision of a great bark, a great ship. And on this ship was the Holy Father. And the Holy Father was guiding this great bark, this great ship, between two pillars. One taller pillar, which had the Eucharist atop of it, and the second slightly shorter pillar, which had our Blessed Mother on top of it. Now, the seas were tempestuous. There was a rough wind and rage to the sea. And as the Holy Father was trying to get this great ship in between these two pillars, which were slightly in the distance, he was made aware of the fact that there were other enemy ships, smaller ships, but ships attacking the portal of the great bark. Now, interesting in the vision of St. John Bosco, from the ships that would come, the smaller ships that were attacking the great bark, from these ships would come not torpedoes, but books. That books would hit the side of the great bark in an effort to damage it. What does that symbolize? We're talking about errors of the mind. We're talking about atheism and communism and materialism and humanism and socialism, all with a sense of taking down the Church of Christ. And we can see this today. The attacks on the moral teachings of the Church are also ubiquitous. And so within this concept and this vision, you have also ships in the back. These are ships that are morally with the bark, which is moving forward, and of course enemy ships are attacking it from the sides, but there's ships in the back of the vision, in the backs of the waters, and these ships, you would say, are morally with the bark of Peter, but they don't want to get in the fight. They fear the fight, so they hang back. Well, as the vision goes on, this prophetic dream, the Pope is struck by one of the enemy ships. The Pope goes down. He then gets up. He's struck a second time and he stays down. The enemy ships rejoice at this apparent victory. But then a second Pope gets up very quickly, and it is that second Pope that guides the church, the bark of Peter, between the pillars of the Eucharist and Our Lady. They're chained together, the church, the bark, and these two pillars, and the enemy ships start crashing one into another in total panic. Then the seas calm, and then the smaller ships who were morally along with the great bark but did not have the courage to take on the battle, then they join the bark. Relevance to today, I think rather obvious. Without getting too speculative in terms of interpretation, isn't it something that John Paul II, John Paul the Great, in 2002 called a year of the Rosary? And it led many Catholics, including many Protestant Christians, to praying the Rosary for the first time. And then in 2004, what did Pope John Paul II do? He called a year of the Eucharist. Now that, regardless of the Don Bosco prophecy, that is certainly trying to get the church to live at the heart of the Eucharist and the heart of Our Lady. And I would say this to you, and we're going to continue this little mini-series, if you will, on how are we supposed to get a holy peace in the midst of the great waves, the great battles taking place today. How do we do it? Well, we do it through greater Eucharistic focus, greater Mass attendance, greater Eucharistic adoration. We do it through greater love of the Blessed Mother, praying the Rosary, consecrating ourselves to her, putting our scapulars on as a sign to Satan that we belong to her. And we do it through an unconditional obedience to the Holy Father and all the social and moral and dogmatic and spiritual teachings of the Church. If you want peace, my friends, that's the way we do it. So, on our first set of this series, let me simply say, we have to make sure that we, as members of the Church, are firmly ensconced between the Eucharist and the Blessed Mother. That's not a position of geography. That's a decision. That's an act of the will. We have to return. We have to return to greater appreciation of the Eucharist and greater love of Our Lady. That's going to mean time, straight out. There's no way you're going to get peace back without taking time to pray more. That's the reality. But you know what? It's a sweet exchange. And the more time we spend with our Eucharistic Jesus in adoration, weekly Mass, and God willing daily Mass where possible, and the more time we pray our Rosary through times of difficulty, depression, the more we're going to get the peace that no one on the outside can take away. This is Mark Miravalle with Mcast. Stay with us as we continue in our series about a new peace during difficult times. Thanks. God bless you.